So we have Dr. Fons Trompenaars. Dr. Trompenaars is a Dutch organizational theorist, management consultant, and author in the fields of cross-cultural communication. And he's also the author of this wonderful book, Riding the Waves of Culture. So today we will speak about organizational culture. Dr. Trompenaars, thank you very much for joining us today.
A pleasure.
Dr. Trompenaars, how can leaders in a project environment utilize organizational culture to more effectively lead their project teams?
Yeah, first of all, I think in general, great leaders always take advantage of the cultural context around them. I don't know if the word utilizing is the best, but at least embed a certain way of working and then go into that and try to take it to their advantage. And that has two sides. Avoid the blunders, so things you don't do in a certain culture, and try to take advantage of the things that facilitate. And if we take the different type of corporate cultures, we can look at, for example, the guided missile. I think the guided missile is another word for project organization, as it says. It's a combination of a interpretation of the organization as fairly flat, because everybody can go at the top, because it's a very task-oriented culture. And it does it with quite some, let's say, egalitarian and task-oriented combinations. Now, that means that very often people are managed by objectives, so there is a very clear task, and so that comes best and closest to the essence of what project management is. Namely, you have a task and you work out the path towards it. In fact, the guided missile, which is a very Anglo-Saxon model, is working best in companies like NASA, where project management almost was invented, if you like, and doesn't hinder the effectiveness of the projects you're doing. And also the mindset of people are, let's get this task done. It is the other three where very often there are more problems. And the other three, if we go through the line, we have the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is a combination of also task orientation, but the task is very much more put into the functions, job descriptions, and combined with more hierarchy. There's an enormous respect for titles. The project leaders also are very often knowledgeable about the project, while in the guided missile, a project leader can even have an MBA. And as you know, MBAs are people who manage a lot, but very often don't know what they're managing, is my experience. And that's okay in certain environments. But if you go to Germany, for example, where the Eiffel Tower is really dominant, you see that people expect from the project leader that they know the details of the project. And that's why they very often have a PhD in the field. So if you're launching a missile to Saturn, you better have a PhD in space technology. While in the guided missile, you don't need to have that. Another aspect of the Eiffel Tower is that very often it's very efficient. It's step by step worked out, the project. While in the guided missile, it's more, let's get the task done, and how we get it done, it doesn't really matter. So it's more effective rather than efficient. In the Eiffel Tower, it's efficiency that counts. Mm-hmm. Then in a nutshell, we got the family. In the family, it's all about loyalty, commitment, and relationships. It's a much more political system, and the project leader needs to know people. So where the guided missile is, you manage by objectives. The management by job description is dominant in the Eiffel Tower. And we got management by subjectives, namely managing the relationships in the family. Very often power-oriented and so on. Then we have in the Incubator, it's very often short-term projects that are very innovative. It's about creativity, it's about innovation, it's about all kinds of stuff that the leadership is, if you like, about self-organization. It's a lot of let people do their own thing. It's very often a management that is like an improvising jazz band. You know, you play with the team as a leader, and you have creative inputs. So the type of leadership in all four corporate cultures are quite different. Let me summarize. Leadership in the guided missile is you manage by objectives, you are very clear in the task, and you guide people and give them resources to get there. In the Eiffel Tower, it's very often about efficiency. You manage by job description, and you really are the expert as a project leader in what you're managing. In the family, the leader is the father, managing the relationships, loyalty, and commitment. And in the incubator, where you combine egalitarian with a much more informal, person-oriented culture, you're really playing with the band. And creativity is really part of that. And if you understand that, I think project management becomes much more effective rather than superimposing the guided missile type of culture on all the other cultures. Because if you ignore those, you're in trouble.
So, and Fons, is it possible to combine or look at different, depending on different project phases, use different, any of those four different kind of paradigms?
Yes. If you take, for example, the phases of Larry Greiner. Larry Greiner says very often a project starts with few people, with a brilliant idea, and around the idea you run your first projects. And that was true with Google. That was true with all kinds of famous companies. It's HP, Hewitt and Packard were two guys, as you have Sergey Brin and Larry Page at Google. They start as an incubator. They start, if you like, on our grid in the top left-hand corner, very egalitarian. And then the project grows, and you get more people on the project, and you see that what was so beautiful in the beginning when you were small in the project leads to what Larry Greiner calls a leadership crisis. It's adhocracy in its extreme. It is almost anarchy. So what you need is the next stage is more the family. So you manage more the relationship, and there is an ultimate respect for the leader, for the project leader. Oh, he says, she says, let's do it. Then if the family grows, you get the next crisis, and that is the crisis of control. People are starting to complain about the control of the project leader. So you need to go to the guided missile to say, let loose, not everything about relationships, let's manage by something that is beyond the leader, by objectives. And so you see in the third stage that you need more of the task orientation, and then finally the execution of all this, and that's the last stage. You get into the Eiffel Tower. But at the end of the day, you need the full infinity loop. In other words, you need to run through those stages. And if you have a mature and large project like the NASA, you need all these leadership styles combined. And we call that dilemma reconciliation. It's top down, it's bottom up, it's vision and execution. It's all these dilemmas combined.
Right. And is there a fine point to understand where to shift from, let's say, an incubator to the egalitarian kind of more mindset, and then moving? So is there or do
it manifests itself very often with the crisis, that something really bugs. And obviously you can, if you know these stages, you can predict that it's coming. So you can perhaps preemptively take some measures. Now we call it that at a certain moment, certain dilemmas hit in your face. Like, you start with the incubator, we want to be creative, we want to have freedom for that creativity. And suddenly you say, yeah, but the client wants the end result, and you can't just keep on playing. So you have the dilemma of, on the one hand, discipline, and on the other hand, creativity. Mm-hmm. And when that dilemma hits your face, you really know, hey, we need to do something about it, and try to reconcile and ask the question, how can the discipline we need help us to become even more creative? Or how can the creativity help us to get more discipline? So in another book we wrote, and that's Riding the Whirlwind, it's not particularly about project management, but it is really about the different stages of innovation. And that is interesting because we describe the type of dilemmas that hit your face when you are in between the different corporate cultures. But the end result of that book was that you need to reconcile them all to really have an approach which makes the project, in this case on innovation, makes the project more successful.
And also, let's say a project goes through all those stages up to the Eiffel Tower. Is there a point where the project leader might say, okay, now we need more innovation, why not maybe create a little incubator somewhere on the side? Or
a very good point. I mean, this is an infinity loop, so it goes on forever.
It will just, so
if you have gone through all the stages, which is all the stages that a project needs. A project needs the creative input, the project needs relationship management, the project needs task management, and the project needs execution management. But then you say, okay, but let's go back in the infinity loop, and then you start with the next generation of innovation. And if you combine them, they're ongoing. Now, there are different approaches to that. You can have, like IBM did, have separate departments that does this and starts again, and you have a lot of seeds and see what flowers grow. You can integrate it into the organization like 3M does everywhere, like Google does. So you create a culture where you don't need separate departments. But there are different ways of doing that. Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, let's say, for instance, Google had the 20% time, they called it, where people could just work on anything that they wanted. Not related to their...
Kind of. They had to make a presentation on what they did with that time.
Exactly. So, but as long as
there are beautiful examples.
And they had to come up with something during that time. So it wasn't just like go and do whatever you want, but they had to present, as you said. And there's also an Australian company called Atlassian. They had also something called FedEx Days, where they had 24 hours and they had to come up with a new solution to some software bug fix and so on. But they had to deliver something at that end of 24 hours. So they had that kind of. So that, I guess, that's more of that falls more into to the incubator kind of mindset, isn't it? And then, but at the same time, they had roles and responsibilities, and they had, there were things that they had to get done. So then it's basically an integration of all the different four elements of that.
Yes.
So anything else, Fons? Do you think, like, for a project leader, what are the most important things that they need to kind of do? Like, what are the steps that they need to take in order to implement a healthy culture of innovation and successful leadership in a project environment?
Now, first of all, there are lots of tools to measure the culture, so measurement is what we call the first step, and that's called recognition. Where in what stage are you? If you are a mature project, I hope you have covered all the 4 boxes, because very often corporate culture models are cookie cutter models where you say, this is your dominant model. But great cultures combine all 4. So that one thing is recognize where you are, in what state of maturity you are. Within the back of your mind that you need all 4 stages, because any mature project needs all 4 stages. So recognition is the first. Then secondly is try to avoid judgment, or in a more positive way, try to respect those differences. Because especially if the project is a multicultural project in terms of different companies joining together or different nationalities joining together, you need to respect those different viewpoints, and as a leader say, we need to reconcile them. And that's the third stage. I think a great project leader needs the art of reconciliation, and also decide where it's not a dilemma and make choices and say, no nonsense, this is what we need to do. And then finally, try to work out the execution, the realizing and routing of all this. So, that would be my advice. First, recognize where you are. Secondly, respect the variety created by either corporate culture, national culture. Then reconcile those differences. And finally, execute your task. So, because at the end of the day, project management, what I like of it is the clarity of what people need. In other words, it is a project. And as you know, projet means to throw in front of you. That's the French projet. And that's the word jet comes from it. It flies in front of you. And that is the point, that the best way to get the task done, the project done, is to take into consideration other things than the task. And that is, for example, values, behaviors, etc., etc.
Exactly, and it is, and a project has, you know, a set starting and an end time. It's got a scope. It's got a budget, and it needs to meet all those. So it's not anything wishy-washy. So it
exactly. But it is the wishy-washy that makes the difference. You know, it's a bit like mergers and acquisitions. You can have great legal integration and you can have great technical integration like the IT system. But at the end of the day, the human behavior will make the difference in the success. And the same with projects. And if you just understand the different leadership styles you need in the different stages, then you're in great shape.
Exactly. And sometimes it just takes a bit of practice and applying those kind of fundamentals that you mentioned.
For sure. And learn through the practice, because not everything will be easy.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Trompenaars. I'm sure all the students will find this video interview very valuable. So thanks again, and looking forward to catch up with you again.
A great pleasure. Thank you, Esam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.